Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. It was raining the night she heard it. Not a storm, just that steady curtain of rain that makes the world feel smaller, closer, softer. It pressed against the windows like breath, running in long silver threads down the glass. Somewhere far off, a wind chime rang once, then was still. She sat alone in the cabin's small kitchen, a candle burning low on the counter beside her. The room smelled of warm tea and old wood, and though the hour had drifted past midnight, she hadn't moved in some time. The woods outside were deep and old, not just trees but memory. She wasn't afraid of them. Not yet. The knock came softly, not on the door, on the wall. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, slow and deliberate, like someone pressing their hand against the outer boards with the full weight of intent. She froze. The candle flickered. It wasn't wind. It wasn't animal. And it wasn't mistaken. She stepped to the door, heart low in her chest like it was trying not to be heard. But she didn't open it. She didn't speak. She simply listened. And the rain kept falling. The knock didn't come again. But when she turned to walk away, she noticed it. Something leaning against the outer threshold, placed just out of reach of the weather. A lantern. Metal. Still dry despite the rain. She hadn't brought it. No one lived nearby. She opened the door slowly. No one was there. No tracks in the mud. No figures in the trees. Only the lantern, resting with quiet purpose against the steps. She crouched, reached for it. It was warm. Not hot. Not glowing. But warm, like something had just carried it a long way and left it with care. She held it up. The rain ran around it but never touched the glass. A faint curl of light moved behind the pane, like smoke lit from within. And inside her chest, something she didn't have words for stirred. She turned once more toward the woods. And this time they felt closer. Not the trees. The path between them. As though the forest had stepped forward slightly. And waited. She didn't bring it inside. The lantern stayed where it had been placed. Just beneath the awning, just above the reach of the rain. It stood like a sentinel or a question too large to carry into the warmth. She watched it from the window for a long time. And the longer she watched, the more it seemed to change. Not in shape. Not in color. But in weight. It began to feel heavy in the world. Like it anchored something unseen. She opened the door again. Slowly. Carefully. The rain had softened now, falling in a hush instead of a patter. As if the world too was holding its breath. She stepped out barefoot. The porch was slick with moss. The candle inside flickered once, then dimmed, but did not die. The lantern was waiting. It gave no flicker. No flare. Only that low, steady glow inside the glass, like a memory that refused to fade. She reached down, touched it, and the air shifted. Not cold, not warm, just awake. She stood with the lantern in both hands. It didn't burn, but it watched. That's what it felt like. Not that something was looking out from the lantern, but that the lantern itself had seen something. Something it carried, and wanted her to see too. She turned to look out past the porch. The woods weren't far. A fringe of pines began just past the edge of the clearing, tall, soaked, black with rain. And beyond them, shadow. Not a trail, but a direction. She should have gone inside, shut the door, returned to her chair, her tea, her candle, pretended nothing had happened. But the lantern was light in her hands now, no longer heavy. It had decided, and something beneath her ribs agreed. So she stepped from the porch. The rain met her gently, threading through her hair, sliding down her shoulders. She moved past the gravel path, through the overgrown garden, into the grass and finally, between the trees. Behind her, the cabin stood quiet. Ahead, the forest leaned inward like a whisper. And the lantern, glowing softly, lit not the world around her, but only the path her next step would take. The forest accepted her like a breath returning to lungs. The first trees she passed beneath weren't strangers. These were the ones she had seen from the porch for years. Tall pines and soaked birch, their trunks familiar, their shadows long but shallow. The kind of woods you think you know. But as she walked deeper, the trees began to change. Subtly at first. The bark grew darker. The rain sounded quieter. The ground lost its crunch. And then came the shift. Not in light, though the lantern barely lit more than a few feet around her. Not in sound, though even the birdsong had vanished. It was in memory. These trees, remembered. She didn't know how she knew it. She just felt it. Every branch she passed beneath leaned slightly toward her. Every trunk stood still, but in a way that didn't feel like rest. It felt like attention. Like she was being watched, not with eyes but with knowing. The lantern never flickered. Its glow stayed steady, but it never chased the dark. It only showed her the way forward. Just enough. Just one step. Then the next. She passed a fallen log with moss grown thick across its middle. A faint mark ran down its length, curved, spiraling, too perfect to be natural. She paused, ran a hand along it. The bark was cool and wet, but the carved line was smooth, dry, as though it had only just been made. The spiral seemed to breathe beneath her fingers, and she understood something, not in words but in feeling. This forest wasn't haunted. It wasn't empty. It was old, and it remembered everyone who had walked its paths before her. She moved on. The trees grew closer now, leaning toward one another above her head, their branches interwoven like hands folded in prayer. Rain tapped softly on the leaves, but not a drop touched the lantern. And soon she came to a bend in the trail, a bend that hadn't been there before. The path curved right, just slightly, just enough to show her what lay ahead. A figure, far off, standing just beyond the reach of the lantern's glow. Not hiding, not moving, waiting. She did not stop walking. She didn't call out, didn't slow her steps. The forest wouldn't have answered anyway. The figure stood perfectly still at the edge of the path, where the lantern's glow faded into the deeper dark. Not looming, not approaching, just there. The kind of presence that didn't need to make itself known, because it had always been part of the woods. As she neared, her heart began to change rhythm. Not faster, not out of fear, but quieter, focused, like the moment before touching the surface of still water, unsure what will look back. The stranger wore a long coat, hood drawn low. The fabric was soaked through, but no water dripped. The rain slid off them as if the forest itself kept them dry. They did not speak, but when she stepped within 3 paces, the stranger turned. Not toward her, not away, just into the path, and walked. No crunch of leaves, no brush of branch, no sound of boots on earth. The lantern's light reached just far enough to catch their back, the folds of the coat catching flickers of reflection with each step. She followed, because there was no question, only motion. The stranger didn't look back, but somehow they knew exactly how far to stay ahead, never more than a breath's reach beyond the circle of her light. The forest around them thickened. Trees grew gnarled and knotted, bark pocked with strange indentations, shapes not quite runes, not quite wounds. The rain faded to mist here, drifting more than falling, clinging to everything without sound. Time became hard to measure. It might have been minutes, might have been an hour. But the path began to slope downward, gentle at first, then steeper, winding into the hollow of something older than the forest itself. Finally, at the bottom of the slope, the stranger stopped. Before them was a grove, circular, and at its center, a fire ring, unlit, but dry, and waiting. The stranger turned to her. Not fully, just enough to show their face beneath the edge of the hood. But there was no face, not blankness, not shadow, just the shimmer of reflected light, like looking into the surface of a dark pool. Not seeing someone else, seeing yourself. She said nothing, and the stranger sat down beside the fire ring. One hand extended slowly, open palm, waiting, not asking, inviting. She knelt across from them, placed the lantern between them on the ring of stones. It flickered, once, then held steady. And though the fire hadn't yet been lit, the clearing already felt warm. The flame rose on its own. There was no spark, no flint, no reaching for dry wood. The moment the lantern touched the ring of stones, a soft breath of heat coiled outward, and the space inside the circle lit with pale fire, slow, blue-white, and silent. It didn't crackle, didn't roar. It simply was. She sat across from the stranger, watching the flame bend without moving, like it knew the shape of the air too well to disturb it. The stranger didn't speak, and she didn't need them to, because in the hush of that hollow grove, she understood something that had been circling the edges of her thoughts since the knock on the cabin wall. She wasn't visiting the forest. She had been called back to it. The rain here never touched the fire ring. It drifted through the branches high above, spun itself into mist, and vanished before it reached the center. She looked up once, half expecting the sky, but the trees had closed in. Not oppressively, just completely. There was no leaving by accident, and no light except the one they shared. The stranger's coat dripped faintly now, water trailing down their sleeves into the mossy soil. And still no face. Only a dim reflection in the hollow where a face should be, flickering slightly with the rhythm of the flame, like it was made of memory, or choice. The fire changed shape as she stared into it, no longer just a small, glowing core, curled now, slowly, rhythmically, into a spiral. She leaned forward slightly, heart slowing in her chest. The light didn't grow brighter, but it felt deeper, like it was showing more than heat or shape. It was showing a path. Not out, not forward, inward. She reached toward it, not to touch, just to feel. And as her hand hovered above the flame, the spiral shifted again, became a trail of pine needles across a forest floor, curving gently into trees she hadn't yet walked through. The stranger moved, just one hand rising slowly from their knee, their fingers unfurled, palm out. Held between thumb and forefinger was a leaf, dark, glossy, curled once at the edge, and pressed into its center, as if laid there by wind and sealed by time, was a perfect imprint of her own spiral. She took it. Their hands didn't meet, but the heat between them lingered, and the forest seemed for the first time to listen. The leaf was still warm in her hand, not from the fire, not from the stranger, but from something else. It held no ink, no carvings, no lines, just a spiral pressed gently into its center, veins of memory spreading from the shape like rivers into soft green. And yet, as she stared, the leaf began to change. Not curl, not crumble, just reveal. A shimmer spread across its surface, subtle, not bright, like the faint light of distant stars seen through fog. Shapes began to emerge, delicate and shifting, as though drawn not on the leaf but into it. Paths, groves, circles, marks she didn't recognize but somehow knew. She moved her fingers beneath it, shielding it from the firelight, and there, etched in faint gold, she saw the forest unfold. Not like a map you'd find in a book, but like a dream-made cartography. The forest was not just where you went, it was what you carried with you. The leaf showed a path, but not a straight one. It spiraled, bent, folded back on itself. At its center was a symbol she couldn't yet read, surrounded by others she felt rather than understood. A place, a memory, a choice. The stranger hadn't moved again. They sat silent, hood low, still as tree bark. Their hand rested once more on their knee, the reflection in their face shape dimming slightly, as if for now they had stepped inward too. She looked back to the fire. The flame was no longer just fire. It was a lantern again. Not the one she'd carried. Another. A reflection of it. But this one floated slightly above the stones, flickering within itself, casting faint rings of light that spun without moving. She held the leaf close to it, and the spiral on its surface aligned. Like a key. A single ring of light peeled outward from the hovering lantern and passed over her. It didn't touch her skin. It moved through her, quietly, like a thought finishing itself. And then the fire dimmed. The spiral light sank inward. The stones cooled. The leaf in her hand pulsed once. Not alive, but awake. The stranger stood. She rose with them. Neither spoke, because there was no question now. The path wasn't just through the forest. It was already written in her hands. The stranger moved ahead. She followed, the spiral leaf still cupped in her palm. The forest did not open wide, it narrowed. The trail curled around roots and stones, ducked beneath bent branches, crossed small rivulets of rainwater that seemed to whisper under their breath. And the deeper they went, the more she felt it. This was not the part of the forest she had walked into. It wasn't just darker, it was older. And not in years, in memory. The trees here leaned at strange angles. Their bark was blackened in places, as if fire had once reached them but then been called back. Some had symbols carved into them, spirals, broken rings, and others that hurt her head to look at for too long. The air was thick with stillness, and beneath it something else. A rhythm, subtle, buried, like breath echoing beneath soil. At a sharp bend in the trail, the stranger stopped again. She almost walked past them but paused, because they were standing beside a tree. Not a tall one, just a crooked thing, maybe her height, bent sideways and wrapped in thin white moss like gauze. A single word was carved into its bark. Except, it wasn't a word, it was a name. Not one she could read, not one she could pronounce, but one she recognized. She didn't know how, but as she stared at it, something in her bones answered. A shiver passed through her, not from cold, from memory trying to rise. Memory that hadn't happened yet. The stranger reached out with one finger, traced the carved name once, slowly, and she saw it change. Not the letters, not the shape, but the feeling of it, like it had looked at her and now chose to remember her too. A name that no longer just belonged to the forest, but one that would belong to her when the time came. The stranger stepped back, bowed their head once, and walked on. She followed, her footsteps quieter than before, because now she understood. She did not need to speak her name to be known. This place already had it. It had simply been waiting for her to come close enough to hear it back. The trail became softer. The roots no longer tangled her steps. The stones no longer shifted beneath her. The forest underfoot was damp and dark and ready, not welcoming exactly, but receptive, like soil waiting for something to be planted. She felt it before she saw it. A pull, not from the stranger, not from the lantern leaf in her hand, but from the ground itself. As if the earth had taken notice of her weight. As if it remembered every footstep that had come before. The stranger stopped again. This time there was no gesture. No tree. No fire. Just an opening in the trail where the moss grew smoother than the rest, ringed in fallen branches and low ferns. She stepped forward. And there, laid into the forest floor, etched not by hand but time, was a spiral. Large. What? Etched into the soft loam with strange precision, as though each curve had been carved by something older than language. It wasn't a symbol. It was a marker. A place where something had begun. Or ended. Or both. She crouched beside it. Touched it. The moss around its edges was dry, despite the constant rain. The groove of the spiral dipped deeper at the center, just enough to hold something. A memory. A story. A name. She didn't place the leaf there. She didn't need to. Because the moment her hand passed over the center, the spiral responded. Not with light. Not with sound. With heat. Soft, radiant warmth spread from the spiral, just enough to lift the mist from the ground. Tiny beads of water rose like breath into the cool air and hovered before drifting upward into the canopy. And within that rising mist, shapes began to form. Not visions. Not hallucinations. Remnants. A shadow walking a path long ago. A hand lighting a lantern. A voice saying a name she almost remembered. Almost but not quite. She watched it all in silence. Not because she couldn't speak. Because speaking would break it. And when the last wisp of mist curled back into the branches above, the spiral in the ground shimmered faintly, then faded. Still visible, but resting again. Like it had offered something, and now waited for her to answer in her own time. She stood. The stranger was already walking. Slow. Deliberate. Never far ahead. And she followed once more. Because the spiral wasn't just in the ground now. It had opened in her. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they moved deeper still. Not a sound stirred except the faint patter of lingering rain dripping from heavy leaves, falling in quiet rhythm on the soft earth. The lantern's glow stretched just far enough to keep the shadows at bay, but it never pushed back the darkness beyond its circle. That darkness felt ancient, older than the trees, older than the soil beneath her knees. She kept her gaze low, watching how the moss curled around twisted roots and how the fallen leaves crinkled softly beneath her feet, their edges dark with moisture. The stranger walked ahead, silent as the mist curling between branches. The curve of their shoulders and the way their feet barely made a sound reminded her that they belonged here, an echo of the forest itself, a fragment of something older than memory. At last, the stranger paused beneath a sprawling oak, its gnarled limbs creaking gently as the wind moved through them like a slow sigh. The tree's bark was rough and pocked with deep scars, wounds that looked as if time had been carved into them. Without a word, the stranger knelt at the base of the tree, brushing aside a thick carpet of leaves that had fallen through countless seasons. She crouched beside them, drawn by a pull she couldn't name, an urgency quiet but insistent, like the pulse of life beneath the earth. The layer of leaves revealed soil dark and soft, yet not lifeless. Beneath the surface, faint ripples seemed to move, shifting slowly as if the earth itself were breathing beneath their feet. And then a sound. Not a voice, not a song, but a whisper, soft and swirling, curling around roots and stones like smoke in the cool air. The whisper seemed to come from the soil itself, rising slowly like the breath of the forest after a long sleep. She placed her hand gently on the cold earth. The whisper wound around her fingers, a murmur just beyond understanding, shaped like language but older than any word she'd ever heard. The stranger's face flickered in the lantern's glow, not quite human, not quite reflection, but something in between. Slowly, they reached into their coat and pulled the spiral leaf from her hand, pressing it down onto the earth where the whisper seemed strongest. The leaf's edges shimmered, catching the faint light and pulsing with warmth, not the heat of fire, but the pulse of life. The whisper rose louder, wrapping through the roots, twisting like vines of sound, pulling threads of memory out of the soil. She felt a wave inside her chest, deep and wide, a swell of feeling that wasn't just in her body but stretched beyond it, tangled with the roots and the stones and the wind. And then, from the whisper, one clear word emerged. Remember. It was not a command, not a plea. It was an invitation. To listen, to belong, to become part of the forest's endless story. She closed her eyes, and the breath of the forest filled her lungs, old as the soil beneath her fingertips, quiet as the spaces between stars. Images unfolded behind her eyelids, shapes of lives once lived, footsteps long vanished, voices carried on wind and rain. She saw a lantern passed from hand to hand, glowing through the dark years. She felt the pull of roots sinking deep, wrapping around secrets and dreams and memories folded beneath the earth. The forest had never been just a place. It was a living thing, woven from stories, from names, from moments folded inside moments. And now it was waiting for her story too. When she opened her eyes, the stranger was rising. The whisper faded into silence once more, the earth still and dark beneath the fallen leaves. But inside her, the echo remained, a pulse, a promise, a beginning. The lantern's light steadied in her hand as they moved forward again, deeper into the path that curved endlessly onward. Because now she understood. To walk this forest was to remember, and to remember was to be alive. The path grew narrower as they descended, the towering trees crowding in until only slivers of sky peeked through their tangled branches. The lantern's light barely reached beyond the curve ahead, soft and steady, a small pulse in the thickening dark. She followed without hesitation, the spiral leaf tucked carefully in her coat pocket, its warmth a quiet reassurance against the chill that seeped into the air. The earth beneath her boots was soft and damp, rich with fallen leaves and secrets long buried. The stranger moved ahead with unerring certainty, their figure a silhouette shifting between shadow and lantern glow. Every so often, a faint shimmer would ripple across the surface of their faceless visage, as though memories were surfacing beneath the reflective mask. At last, the trail ended in a small clearing dominated by an enormous root system, sprawling and twisted like the veins of the forest itself. The roots coiled and tangled, rising from the earth in great arches and gnarled fingers. In the center, where the roots converged, was a single thick root that pulsed faintly with an inner light, a steady glow that seemed to breathe. The stranger knelt beside it, fingers hovering just above the glowing root. She approached cautiously, the air around the root humming softly, vibrating with a rhythm both foreign and familiar. Slowly, the stranger pressed their palm to the root's surface. The glow brightened, spreading tendrils of light through the tangle of roots like veins of silver fire. The ground beneath her feet thrummed with life. Without speaking, the stranger gestured for her to do the same. Her hand trembled as she reached forward, pressing it flat against the pulsing root. A rush of warmth flooded her veins, a flood of images and sensations crashing over her. The feel of soil crumbling between fingers long gone. The scent of pine needles and rain-drenched earth. The echo of voices whispered beneath canopy shadows. Faces, fleeting, distant, familiar, passing like wisps of mist. She gasped softly, the root's energy seeping into her bones, stitching her story to the forest's endless weave. The spiral leaf in her pocket pulsed in harmony, a heartbeat matched by the memory root. The stranger's voice, low and almost lost beneath the rustle of leaves, whispered, "You are part of the root now, part of the memory." And as the lantern flickered once more, the clearing seemed to hold its breath, a sacred place where time folded in on itself, where the past and present became one. She knew then that this path was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the forest, to the stories beneath the bark, to the whispered names carried by the wind, and to the lantern she carried, a light that would guide her through the darkness, now and forever. The pulse of the memory root lingered in her fingertips, a steady thrum that echoed deep within her chest as she rose from the clearing. The stranger stood silently beside her, their faceless reflection calm and unyielding. Together they moved back onto the winding path, the lantern's glow carving a narrow sanctuary through the thick forest gloom. Above, the canopy wove tightly, branches entwined like ancient hands shielding a secret sky. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of damp moss and earth, yet beneath it she sensed a vibrancy, an unseen rhythm humming just beyond hearing. She glanced at the stranger, who seemed to shimmer faintly, a ripple of light passing over the empty face as if memories stirred beneath their surface. Without words, the stranger paused beneath a thick maple whose leaves glowed faintly with an otherworldly shimmer, as though touched by the lantern's own light. The ground beneath the tree was carpeted with leaves more vibrant than any she had ever seen, reds and golds burning softly even in the night. She knelt to touch them, feeling their delicate texture, as if they were made of light and shadow woven together. Suddenly, a soft echo rose around her. The faintest sound of voices carried on the wind, distant laughter, the brush of footsteps, a sigh long forgotten. The stranger's hand reached out, fingers tracing a spiral carved into the tree's bark, an echo of the mark she'd seen earlier. The whispers grew, weaving through the trees, wrapping around her like a shroud of memories that weren't hers but felt deeply familiar. She closed her eyes and let the echoes wash over her, the weight of stories folding into her bones, the forest breathing its ancient tales into her soul. When she opened her eyes, the maple's leaves flickered once more, then settled into stillness, the voices fading into the quiet. The stranger nodded as if satisfied. The path ahead twisted into deeper shadow, but now, with the memory root thrumming inside her and the forest stories threading through her mind, she felt ready to walk on. Because the forest was no longer a place she passed through. It was a part of her. And every step forward was a step deeper into the story. The path twisted again, narrowing as moss-draped branches arched overhead, weaving a vaulted ceiling of green and shadow. The air here felt thicker, alive with a presence just beneath the surface, like the forest itself was breathing quietly. Her footsteps softened in the damp earth, the whisper of moss and leaf litter blending with the faint sound of her own breath. The lantern's glow remained steady in her hand, a small sun in the dark, its light gentle but unwavering. Ahead, the stranger paused beside a hollowed stump, its interior hollow deep and wide. The air that rose from within was cool, fragrant with the scent of earth and old rain. She knelt, peering into the hollow. It was dark, but as she watched, faint motes of light began to gather, soft, drifting sparks that moved like slow fireflies in a dream. The stranger's hand brushed the stump's rough edge, and the glowing sparks swirled upward, coalescing into shapes, faint silhouettes of figures from times long past. Ghostly faces smiled, bowed heads, hands reaching out in silent greeting. A chorus of breaths seemed to rise from the hollow, not cold but warm, as if the forest exhaled memories held deep in its roots and stones. She felt those breaths against her skin, a soft touch that stirred something deep inside her. A longing, a peace, and a quiet sorrow all at once. The stranger's voice broke the silence, barely more than a breath. Here, the forest remembers its children. Those who walked before. Those who wait. She reached forward, letting the lantern's light spill into the hollow. The faces shimmered, growing clearer for a moment, each one a story, a life folded into the forest's endless breath. And in that breath, she felt her own story take root. The fire in the lantern pulsed once, then steadied. She stood. The stranger turned and began walking again, the path inviting her onward into the depths where the forest whispered most clearly. With each step, the breath of the hollow settled into her chest. She was no longer just a visitor. She was part of the forest's breath. The deeper they ventured, the heavier the shadows became, folding around the trees like thick velvet curtains, soft yet impenetrable. The lantern's glow seemed smaller here, swallowed by the dark, yet it pulsed with quiet insistence. The stranger moved ahead without hesitation, steps measured and sure, leading her further into the heart of the forest's secrets. The air was cool, carrying a faint, earthy scent mixed with something older, something almost like whispered voices folded into the breeze. At the edge of a small clearing, the stranger stopped. There, etched into the ground, was a pattern of stones arranged in a spiral, each one smooth and dark, glistening with moisture despite the rain having stopped long ago. She knelt beside the spiral, tracing its curve with her fingers. The stones hummed faintly under her touch, an echo of power, of stories anchored in earth and stone. Suddenly, the shadows around her shifted. Not like a shape, but like a voice, soft and breathy, a susurrus of sound threading through the leaves. The stranger's faceless visage flickered briefly, and from the shadows came a low murmur, growing steadily into words spoken just beneath hearing. She listened. The shadows spoke of forgotten names, of lost footsteps, of moments folded into time like pressed flowers in a book. They spoke not to frighten but to remind that every darkness holds a story, every silence a secret waiting, and every path, no matter how shadowed, a story to be carried forward. The lantern pulsed warmly in her hand, a beacon not against the dark, but within it. The stranger stood, turning toward her with a nod. It was time to keep walking, for the forest stories were far from done. The deeper they ventured into the heart of the forest, the thicker the shadows became. They pooled at the base of towering trees, spilled across the uneven ground, and draped the tangled undergrowth like heavy velvet curtains. The lantern's steady glow, once a small sun in the night, now seemed fragile, a flicker battling the vast ocean of darkness that stretched endlessly in every direction. Yet the light never faltered. It pulsed gently in her grasp, a quiet promise against the swallowing gloom. The stranger moved with a calm certainty, every step deliberate, as if the earth itself bent around their passage. She kept close, feeling the damp air thicken with an ancient energy, a blend of moss, wet bark, and something older and more intangible, like the whisper of a long-forgotten language carried in the wind. The canopy above knitted tighter here, branches woven into a cathedral-like ceiling of green and shadow. Moonlight was a distant memory, but the forest did not feel empty. Instead, it felt alive, vibrant with the breath of secrets long buried beneath bark and soil. After what felt like hours walking in silence, the stranger stopped abruptly at the edge of a small clearing. The air shifted, still and expectant. In the center of the clearing lay a spiral, no larger than a man's outstretched arms, crafted from smooth, dark stones. They glistened faintly despite the rain having ceased, their surfaces slick with a dampness that looked both fresh and ancient. The spiral curled inward endlessly, like the swirl of water down a drain, or the curve of a shell born from the sea. She knelt beside it, drawn in by the hypnotic pattern. Her fingers brushed the stones lightly, feeling the cold smoothness beneath her skin. Almost imperceptibly, a faint vibration hummed beneath her touch, a subtle echo of energy woven into the earth itself. The lantern's glow seemed to brighten in response, casting pale rings of light across the spiral's surface. Then, as if awakened by her presence, the shadows around the clearing stirred. Not with motion but with sound, a susurrus that slipped through the leaves and twined around the branches. It was a soft, breathy murmur, woven from voices too quiet and fragmented to understand at first. The stranger's faceless reflection flickered with the shifting shadows, a shimmer passing over the smooth void where a face might have been. The murmuring voices grew clearer, weaving words just beneath hearing, like the faint rustle of pages turning in a forgotten book. They spoke not in threats, but in gentle reminders, of forgotten names carved into bark, of footsteps long vanished into earth, of moments folded delicately into the fabric of time like fragile pressed flowers. She closed her eyes to listen more deeply. The shadows whispered of lives lived in silence beneath the canopy, those who had walked these woods long before, their stories layered like rings within the ancient trees. They spoke of the sorrow and joy held within the forest's embrace, the laughter of children chasing fireflies, the quiet mourning of those lost to time, the soft prayers uttered beneath starlit skies. Each word was a thread, weaving her closer into the endless tapestry of the forest's memory. Though the darkness pressed in, it was not threatening. It was an invitation to remember, to hold close the stories carried on wind and rain, to honor the silent voices that gave life to the night. The lantern pulsed warmly in her hand, a steady heartbeat that pushed not against the dark, but within it, like a candle burning softly at the center of a vast cave. The stranger rose and turned toward her, their faceless gaze steady and knowing. It was time to move on, because the forest stories were far from done. There were more whispers yet to hear, more shadows to understand. And she was no longer just a traveler in the dark. She was part of the story unfolding beneath the endless canopy. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, the spiral stone pattern fading behind her as the path curved onward, winding deeper into the heart of the forest's mysteries. The path beyond the spiral led them deeper into a realm where the forest seemed to breathe. Each step forward felt like a slow inhalation, the air drawing tightly between the ancient limbs of trees overhead. The canopy here was so dense it blotted out all but the faintest slivers of sky, leaving the world wrapped in an emerald twilight that seemed neither day nor night. Her breath mingled with the damp air, a quiet rhythm joined with the subtle rustling of leaves and the soft whisper of unseen wings. Somewhere far above, the faint trill of an owl wove through the shadows, a song of loneliness and waiting that settled deep in her chest. The lantern's glow remained her constant companion, a soft pulse of warmth and light that never overpowered the darkness but held it gently at bay. Its flame flickered once in a silent sigh, as if the forest's breath itself had touched it. The stranger moved ahead with graceful certainty, their form gliding over mossy roots and patches of soft ferns that cushioned the path. Every movement seemed choreographed with the subtle music of the woods, a dance between shadow and light, presence and absence. As she followed, she noticed the small details, the way the bark of the trees was mottled with lichen that shimmered faintly in the lantern light, the delicate spiderwebs strung like fragile veils between branches, catching droplets that sparkled like tiny stars. Then suddenly the forest opened before them. A clearing stretched wide, bathed in the muted glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to stones and fallen logs. Their pale blue light pulsed gently, casting dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. At the center of the clearing, A pool of still water reflected the lantern's glow, rippling softly with the breath of the forest. The stranger stopped at the edge, kneeling beside the pool. They dipped a hand into the cool water, causing rings to spread outward, each one carrying shimmering light across the surface. She knelt beside them, the cold air prickling her skin as she reached out. The water was still warm beneath her fingers, though no sun had touched it in hours. For a moment, she saw her own reflection, the lantern's light casting flickering patterns across her face, eyes wide with wonder and a trace of fear. But beneath the surface something stirred. A ripple that wasn't from the water, but from the memory beneath it. Images formed, visions of paths she had yet to walk, voices she had yet to hear, stories she had yet to tell. The forest was offering her a glimpse beyond the veil, a breath held between moments, where past and future intertwined. The stranger's voice was a soft murmur, barely more than the rustle of leaves. To walk the path is to hold the breath between what was and what will be. She swallowed, heart pounding with the weight of the forest's promise. Rising, the stranger extended a hand. Together, they stepped away from the pool, leaving the glowing clearing behind, and moved onward into the waiting dark, into the story yet unfolding beneath the branches. The forest grew quieter as they moved onward, the hum of life fading into a hushed reverence. The trees stood taller here, their trunks thick and ancient, bark rough with deep fissures that twisted like the paths of veins. She reached out to touch one, feeling the grooves beneath her fingers, each ridge and scar a testament to years beyond count, a chronicle etched in wood. The lantern's glow flickered softly, casting long shadows that danced in time with the swaying branches above. As she pressed her palm to the bark, a vibration pulsed beneath her skin, a low melodic hum rising from the tree itself. The sound was not music as she knew it, but a song carved deep into the very fiber of the forest. It wrapped around her, gentle yet insistent, weaving through her thoughts like the wind weaving through leaves. She closed her eyes and let the song enfold her, an ancient melody carried by the earth and sky, one that spoke of beginnings and endings, of growth and decay, of life held in balance beneath the endless canopy. The stranger's faceless form stood quietly nearby, a steady presence in the shifting light. When she opened her eyes, the tree's bark shimmered faintly, the grooves glowing with soft golden light that traced the melody's path. The forest was alive not just with movement, but with memory, each tree a keeper of stories sung in silence. She understood then that her journey was part of this song, a note added to the vast, eternal chorus. The lantern pulsed warmly in her hand as she stepped back from the tree, the melody lingering in her heart. The path ahead beckoned, winding deeper into the forest's embrace, toward secrets yet to be revealed and stories yet to be told. The forest around her seemed to breathe in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Each step she took was cushioned by layers of moss and fallen leaves, soft underfoot as if the earth itself welcomed her passage. The lantern's light cast long, wavering shadows that flickered over roots gnarled like ancient fingers, twisting and curling into the earth's dark embrace. She paused at the edge of a small clearing, where the roots of several mighty trees intertwined, forming a natural cradle that looked as if it could hold the weight of the world. The stranger knelt there, resting a hand lightly on the twisted roots. The light in their faceless reflection deepened, shimmering with something unspoken, a quiet invitation. She joined them, her fingers tracing the coarse bark. The roots pulsed softly beneath her touch, alive with a slow, steady energy that seemed to bridge the gap between past and present, waking and dreaming. A cool breeze rustled the leaves above, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers and earth after rain. The forest whispered around her, words not spoken but felt, a language older than time itself. Closing her eyes, she allowed herself to drift on the edge of waking and dreaming, caught between the tangled roots and the endless sky. The lantern's glow softened, a gentle beacon in the half-light, guiding her deeper into the forest's heart, where stories slept beneath roots and dreams waited to be awakened. She breathed in the forest's breath and knew that she was no longer alone. The path stretched onward, endless and alive. The forest around her shifted as they moved onward. It was not just a place of trees and shadows now, it was a living, breathing presence that enfolded her like a slow, patient breath. Each step sank gently into the soft earth, cushioned by thick moss and a carpet of fallen leaves that seemed to pulse faintly underfoot, as if the ground itself held a heartbeat. The lantern's light, steady, warm, unwavering, cast long shadows that wavered and danced along the trunks of ancient trees, illuminating the deep grooves and knotted roots that twisted like the veins of the forest's very heart. The air smelled rich and loamy, saturated with the scent of wet bark, moss, and the faint perfume of wildflowers hidden beneath the canopy. Ahead, the path narrowed between two massive oaks, their roots tangled and gnarled, arching over the earth like the interlaced fingers of a silent prayer. She slowed her pace, captivated by the intricate web of roots weaving in and out of the soil, each one thick and knotted, seemingly centuries old. The stranger halted beside her, kneeling quietly at the base of one tree. Without a word, their hand reached out, brushing over the roots as though greeting an old friend. The lantern's glow brightened slightly, casting a halo of light around the twisted roots. She crouched beside the stranger, reaching out to touch the coarse bark. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, a slow, rhythmic vibration pulsed through her palm and traveled up her arm like a whispered heartbeat. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but profoundly alive. The roots seemed to breathe beneath her touch, an ancient breath, deep and steady, as if the forest's memories were folded into their very core. The sensation stirred something within her, an echo of forgotten stories, voices carried by the wind, and moments suspended in time. Around her, the forest held its breath. The usual sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls faded away, replaced by a hush that felt sacred and infinite. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink deeper into the moment. Images began to surface behind her eyelids, a dance of light and shadow weaving through the roots, figures moving in slow, graceful motions, hands reaching out to touch the earth, voices rising in soft song beneath the canopy. It was a memory, or perhaps a dream, a glimpse into the lives woven into this very soil. She could feel the pulse of those who had walked here long ago, their footsteps tracing patterns that the forest still remembered. Their hopes, their fears, their laughter and tears, each one a thread in the tapestry of this place. The stranger's voice was a gentle murmur in the quiet. This forest remembers more than you see. It holds the stories of those who came before, of those who listened, of those who waited. The roots are its whispering heart. Her fingers tightened around a thick root as the pulse deepened, and for a moment she felt a connection stretching beyond time. A bridge woven from earth and memory, linking her to every story that had ever unfolded beneath these branches. The lantern's light seemed to breathe in response, glowing warmer, casting dancing rings of light that spiraled upward like gentle flames. The shadows flickered and shifted as if the forest itself was awakening, watching. She opened her eyes, meeting the stranger's faceless reflection, no longer empty but shimmering with fragments of light, like stars scattered across a night sky. Rising, she took a deep breath, the cool forest air filling her lungs with something ancient and powerful. She was no longer a mere wanderer here. She was part of the forest's memory now. And with that knowledge came a new weight, a sacred responsibility to carry the stories forward, to honor the whispers beneath the roots, and to walk the path with care. The stranger stood, offering a slow nod. Together, they rose and stepped back onto the narrow trail, the roots closing behind them like the closing pages of a book. Ahead, the forest awaited, with more secrets to share, more stories to unfold. And the lantern's steady flame would guide her through every step of the journey yet to come. The path wound upward now, climbing gently as the forest shifted once more around her. The dense undergrowth thinned, revealing towering trees that stretched so high their tops vanished into the misty gloom above. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of pine resin and the faint, sweet hint of wildflowers hidden far beyond the reach of sight. Each footstep felt lighter here, as if the earth beneath her was softer, welcoming her passage with a gentle give that barely whispered beneath her boots. The lantern's flame glowed steady in her hand, a quiet companion that seemed to pulse in time with her own heartbeat. Above, the canopy stirred with a soft rustling, as if the trees themselves were speaking in a language of leaves and wind. Shafts of silver moonlight filtered through the branches, fracturing into shards of light that danced on the forest floor, painting fleeting patterns that flickered like memories. The stranger moved ahead with fluid grace, barely disturbing the quiet symphony of the woods. Their steps left no mark in the mossy ground, their presence more a part of the forest than an intrusion. She followed without question, her senses sharpened, attuned to every whisper and shadow. At the crest of the hill, the forest opened into a vast clearing bathed in ethereal light. The moon hung low, its glow soft and almost tangible, casting long shadows that stretched like reaching hands across the glade. In the center stood an ancient tree, its trunk wider than a cottage doorway, bark gnarled and scarred with the passage of countless seasons. She approached slowly, awe settling deep in her chest. The tree seemed alive with stories, its rings a chronicle of storms weathered, suns risen and set, lives intertwined beneath its protective boughs. The stranger knelt at its base, resting a hand against the rough bark. Instantly the forest responded. A low hum vibrated through the air, a deep song that rose from the earth and swelled in her veins, a heartbeat shared between tree and soul. She reached out to join the stranger, her fingers tracing the ancient grooves. The bark was warm beneath her touch, pulsing with life and memory. Her vision blurred, and in the twilight behind closed lids, scenes flickered. Faces of those who had come before, moments of joy and sorrow, whispers of names lost to time but never forgotten. The lantern's light grew brighter, filling the clearing with a soft, golden glow that chased away the deepest shadows. The air shimmered with the breath of the forest, alive and listening. The stranger's voice was a gentle murmur carried on the breeze. Here, beneath the oldest boughs, the past and present entwine. The forest holds us all, its stories, its secrets, its soul. She breathed deeply, the weight of the moment pressing into her bones. She was not merely walking through the forest. She was becoming part of its eternal story, woven into the canopy, carried by the wind, whispered beneath every leaf. As the night stretched on, the lantern's flame pulsed steady and sure, a beacon guiding her deeper into the wild heart of the forest, toward mysteries still waiting to be unveiled. As she descended from the ancient tree's clearing, the forest seemed to exhale, a slow, breathy sigh that drifted through the branches and settled low among the ferns and moss. The path wound downward, twisting through narrow passages where the trees pressed closer, their limbs forming a living tunnel dimly lit by the fading glow of her lantern. The air grew thick with mist, cool and damp, curling around her ankles like soft fingers reaching to pull her deeper into the woods. The fog was alive, not just water suspended in air, but a moving veil carrying the weight of whispered memories, secrets breathed out by the forest itself. Each step muffled beneath the heavy carpet of moss and wet leaves, the silence around her was profound, as if the forest held its breath. The stranger walked ahead with quiet confidence, their presence a steady thread guiding her through the shifting haze. The lantern's light flickered faintly, casting elongated shadows that stretched and bent with the movement of the mist. The glow was muted here, swallowed slowly by the rising fog that seemed to absorb sound and light alike. She reached out a hand, fingers brushing through the mist, feeling the cold wetness cling and drip like liquid silver. The mist swirled around her wrist, cool and soft, whispering in voices just beyond hearing, words in a language she could almost understand, ancient and melodic, like a lullaby sung beneath starry skies long forgotten. The stranger stopped suddenly, turning to face her. Though their face remained a flickering reflection of light and shadow, their gesture was clear, a nod toward the deeper forest where the mist thickened, folding around trees that loomed like silent sentinels. With a steadying breath, she stepped forward, the lantern's warmth a steady pulse against the creeping cold. The mist thickened, swirling at her knees, then rising to her waist, wrapping her in a cool embrace that blurred the edges of the world. Time seemed to slow. Each heartbeat stretched, the forest's whispers growing louder, more insistent. Shapes moved just beyond sight, shadows that flickered between the trees, echoes of footsteps that hadn't yet come. She reached the center of a small glade, where the mist parted like curtains drawn back to reveal a circle of stones, worn smooth by time and weather. At the center, a pool of dark water reflected the lantern's glow, rippling gently despite the still air. The stranger knelt beside it, their hand reaching down to touch the water's surface. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection into shimmering waves of light and shadow. She knelt beside them, gazing into the depths of the pool. The water was impossibly dark, like a mirror to a world beneath the world, a place where memories slept, waiting to be awakened. The mist curled around them, thick and alive, carrying with it the forest's breath and the weight of untold stories. The lantern's flame flickered once, then steadied, a beacon in the gathering mist, guiding her onward into the unknown. The dark water before them was like a pool of liquid night, still and deep, reflecting the flickering lantern light with a shimmer that seemed almost alive. The surface held more than just her image. It held echoes, ghostly impressions of moments past and possibilities yet to come. She leaned closer, breath shallow, eyes searching the depths as shapes began to shift beneath the glassy surface. Faint outlines emerged, figures cloaked in shadow, faces blurred like memories fading at dawn, hands reaching toward something unseen. The stranger beside her reached out, fingertips barely touching the water. As their hand made contact, ripples spread outward, and the reflections danced, weaving between shadow and light like threads of a forgotten tapestry. The pool became a window. Scenes unfolded in flickers. A child laughing beneath these same trees long ago, an old woman lighting a lantern by the fire's glow, a gathering of voices spoken in a language lost to time. Her heart quickened. These were stories carried by the forest itself, lives woven into the soil and sky, forever entwined with the path she now walked. The stranger's faceless reflection shimmered brighter, as if illuminated by the pool's ancient light. They spoke softly, voice barely above a whisper yet clear as the night air. To see is to remember. To remember is to become. She closed her eyes, letting the images sink into her mind, feeling the pulse of the forest's memory settle deep within her bones. When she opened them again, the pool's surface stilled, returning to its mirror-like calm. The mist around them swirled gently, carrying a soft scent of rain and pine. Rising slowly, the stranger turned and gestured down the path that led deeper into the forest's heart, where shadows lengthened and secrets waited patiently to be uncovered. She took a breath, the weight of the lantern warm and steady in her hand. With one last glance at the reflecting pool, she stepped forward, the veil of mist parting before her like a silent invitation. The journey continued, into the unknown, beneath the canopy of dreams and memory. The path grew narrower, winding through thick clusters of ancient trees whose trunks were scarred and twisted like gnarled hands reaching skyward. The air was dense, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of resin. Above, the canopy closed tighter, swallowing the moonlight and casting everything into a deep, velvety darkness. She moved carefully, the soft crunch of her footsteps muffled by a thick layer of moss. The lantern in her hand glowed steadily, its warm light barely piercing the shadowed veil. Around her, the forest was alive in ways she couldn't see. Whispers in the breeze, the rustle of leaves, the subtle creak of branches shifting with unseen movements. Then through the dim glow she noticed them. Figures standing just beyond the edge of the lantern's reach, tall and still like statues carved from bark and shadow. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods woven from leaves and moss, and their eyes glimmered faintly, reflecting the lantern's light like stars caught in deep pools. They were the silent watchers, ancient guardians of this forest realm, neither hostile nor welcoming but endlessly observant. Their presence was a reminder that this path was sacred, and every step forward was both an honor and a trial. The stranger stopped, bowing their heads slightly in acknowledgement of the watchers. She followed suit, feeling the weight of unseen eyes tracing her every movement. One of the figures stepped forward, reaching out a hand that seemed formed from the very bark of the surrounding trees. From the palm, a single seed appeared, glowing softly with an inner light. The stranger gestured for her to take it. With trembling fingers, she accepted the seed, warm and pulsing gently as if alive with possibility. This seed, the stranger said, voice low and reverent, is a promise, a beginning. To walk the lantern path is to carry both light and shadow, to nurture what grows from the smallest of beginnings. She looked up to the watchers, feeling their silent strength settle around her like a protective cloak. The lantern's flame brightened in her hand, steady and sure. And with that, she stepped forward again, the path stretching out before her, dark, mysterious, and filled with the quiet hum of ancient power. The forest closed around her like a slow, breathless sigh, each breath she took mingling with the cool, damp air that curled beneath the heavy canopy above. Here, beneath the entwined arms of ancient giants, the world seemed to hold itself still, frozen in a moment where time was less a force and more a suggestion, a gentle pulse beneath the surface of all things. Her footsteps fell softly on a carpet of moss so thick it felt like walking on the very clouds of the earth, cushioned and cool. The scent of damp wood and fresh rain mingled with something else, something ancient and sweet, like the scent of distant storms and old promises whispered in languages lost to memory. The lantern's warm light was a quiet presence in her palm, steady as her heartbeat, casting soft pools of golden glow that fought to keep the darkness at bay but never quite banished it. Shadows curled and stretched between the trees, thick and alive with secrets. Ahead, the silent watchers stood like statues carved from living bark and moss. Their faces were veiled in shadow beneath their hoods, but their eyes caught the lantern's glow, sparkling faintly like stars caught in the deepest wells of the forest. They were not merely guardians, they were the breath of the forest made flesh, the echoes of every whisper, every secret held in the folds of these woods. She approached slowly, feeling the weight of their gaze settling on her like a physical thing, both a challenge and a benediction. The stranger beside her moved with reverence, bowing their heads slightly in respect. One watcher stepped forward, their hand rising from the folds of their cloak, fingers curling open to reveal a small seed resting in the palm. The seed glowed softly, a pale green flame burning quietly from within. It pulsed gently as if alive, breathing with the slow rhythm of the forest itself. The stranger's voice broke the silence, low and reverent, barely louder than the rustle of leaves. This seed is more than life. It is a promise, fragile, potent, eternal. To carry it is to carry the hope of growth, of change, and of new beginnings born from silence. She reached out, hesitation weaving with a surge of wonder. The moment her fingers brushed the seed, warmth blossomed beneath her skin, spreading like sunlight through veins. The pulse deepened, a quiet thrum that matched the rhythm of her breath and the slow heartbeat of the earth. The watchers shifted, their bodies swaying subtly in time with an unseen song. Around her, the forest seemed to lean closer, listening. The branches above trembled with the weight of unspoken stories, their whispers threading through the cool night air. She held the seed carefully, cradling it like the fragile hope it was. It was a symbol, a charge, a responsibility she felt settled deep within her. More than a burden, more than a gift. A lifeline connecting her to the pulse of the forest and to every soul who had walked this path before. The stranger stepped back, folding into the shadows as the watchers began to recede, their forms blurring and melting into the trees. The pulse of the seed in her hand was steady, insistent, a quiet beacon against the vast silence. For a moment she stood alone. The forest wrapped around her like a living shroud, the lantern's glow steady and unwavering. Her breath came slow and deep, mingling with the mist that curled beneath the trees, swirling softly like smoke from a fire long extinguished but never forgotten. Her thoughts drifted to the journey ahead, the endless path winding deeper into the unknown, the stories still hidden beneath layers of shadow and light. The seed was a beginning, but also a promise to nurture, to protect, and to grow in ways she could not yet understand. As she took a tentative step forward, the forest sighed again, a long, low sound that seemed to echo beneath the ground and rise in a chorus of whispers through the canopy. The lantern flickered once, then burned steady, an unyielding flame in the vast, dark woods. And with that she walked on. The seed pulsed softly in her palm, its gentle heartbeat an echo of the forest's own rhythm. Every step she took seemed to weave her deeper into a world that was at once both ancient and alive, a place where the very soil beneath her feet whispered secrets in a language older than time. The path narrowed here, framed by towering roots that twisted and curled like the veins of some great sleeping creature beneath the earth. The air was cooler now, thick with the scent of damp moss and rich loam, and each breath she took tasted of history, deep, dark, and full of stories waiting to be told. The lantern's light barely reached beyond the immediate circle around her feet, casting long shadows that stretched and flickered like ghostly fingers between the tree trunks. Above, the canopy was a thick web of leaves and branches, blotting out the stars and moonlight, wrapping the forest in a cloak of velvet darkness. She paused, crouching beside a tangle of roots that pulsed faintly beneath the surface as if alive. The ground beneath was soft and warm, almost breathing beneath her touch. It felt like a living heart, steady and sure. The stranger knelt beside her, silent as the earth itself. Without words, they reached into the soil, fingers disappearing beneath the moss. When they pulled back, they held a handful of dark earth, rich and fertile, crumbling softly through their fingers. She took it from them, letting it sift slowly through her own hands, feeling the weight of the forest's memory in every grain. This earth was ancient, the foundation of everything that grew here, the cradle of all life and death entwined in an endless dance. Around them, the forest seemed to listen, the silence deepening until it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. The distant call of a night bird echoed faintly, a solitary song weaving through the stillness. She looked up, eyes tracing the tangled web of roots above her, the veins of the earth pulsing with unseen life. They seemed to connect everything, tree to tree, past to present, her to the forest and beyond. With a slow, steady breath, she pressed the glowing seed into the soft earth at the base of the great roots, burying it gently beneath the moss and soil. The moment the seed touched the ground, a warmth spread outward, a soft light blossoming beneath the surface like the first glow of dawn. The lantern's flame flared brighter, casting golden rings that pulsed in time with the seed's quiet heartbeat. The forest around her stirred, leaves quivered, branches shifted, and the ground beneath her feet hummed with life. The stranger rose silently, their form dissolving into the shadows like mist melting at sunrise. She stood alone now, cradling the lantern, the seed planted and alive beneath her touch. The path stretched onward, dark, mysterious, and endless. But she was no longer just a traveler here. She was a keeper, a bearer of stories, a part of the forest's eternal weave. With the seed of silence planted beneath the veins of the earth, she took the next step forward, into the heart of the forest and deeper into the story waiting to be told. The forest around her seemed to breathe in waves, slow and deliberate, as if the earth itself pulsed with the heartbeat of the countless lives it had cradled. The seed she had planted beneath the twisted roots was no longer simply a fragile promise. It had become a pulse of light beneath the soil, a quiet call that echoed through the veins of the forest. The canopy above thickened, shadows deepening to a velvet black that seemed to absorb sound itself. Her footsteps softened on the thick moss, each movement measured and deliberate, as though the forest demanded a reverence beyond words. A faint breeze stirred the leaves, carrying whispers, voices so soft they could have been imagined or perhaps dreamed. She paused, closing her eyes to listen. The whispers came from beneath her feet, threading through the soil and roots like a hidden symphony. The stranger's absence was palpable, yet not unsettling. It was as if the forest had folded their presence into itself, weaving their spirit through the ancient trees and fertile earth. Her hand brushed against a root that stretched like a great serpent across the path. The bark was rough, cold, but beneath her fingers, it pulsed faintly, warm and alive. The forest was speaking, not in words but in feelings, memories, and the slow unfolding of time. She knelt, placing the lantern down gently on the ground. The light flickered softly, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with a will of their own. Beneath the roots, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Shapes began to coalesce in the mist, figures of those who had walked the path before, travelers, guardians, seekers, their faces blurred, yet filled with an unmistakable urgency. Her breath caught as one figure stepped forward, reaching toward her with an open hand, eyes shining with a depth of knowing that transcended time. Though she could not hear their voice, the message was clear. The path was not hers alone. It was shared, a tapestry woven from countless lives, each thread a story, a secret, a memory etched into the soil and sky. She rose slowly, heart heavy with the weight of those unspoken stories. The lantern's flame steadied, bright and unwavering. With a final glance at the tangled roots beneath which the whispers lingered, she stepped forward once more, the forest closing softly behind her, carrying the echoes of all who had come before. The journey was far from over. The path had narrowed to barely more than a winding trail beneath towering ancient trees whose branches interlaced like woven hands, blotting out even the faintest light from above. The air hung heavy, saturated with the rich scent of wet earth and the subtle musk of decayed leaves, a scent that spoke of endings and beginnings entwined. Her footsteps were soft but deliberate, a measured rhythm in the profound silence that stretched between the trees. The lantern's warm glow pulsed gently, a heartbeat against the vast shadowed world pressing close. The seed she had planted beneath the twisted roots felt like a quiet pulse in her pocket, tethering her to the forest's slow breathing, the unseen pulse beneath the surface. Ahead, the trail opened into a vast clearing, a hollow where the forest seemed to breathe outward in slow waves. In the center stood a tree unlike any she had seen, a towering, magnificent giant whose trunk was thick and gnarled, its bark etched with spirals and symbols that glowed faintly with an inner light. This was the heart of the forest, the source of its memory, its life, and its silent song. She approached the great tree, each step heavy with awe and reverence. As she neared, the lantern's light flared, illuminating the glowing carvings on the bark. The spirals pulsed in time with her heartbeat, each symbol a story, a moment, a life preserved within the living wood. The air vibrated with quiet power, a deep resonance that seemed to echo in the bones of the earth itself. The forest held its breath, waiting, watching, listening. She placed her hand against the bark, feeling the warmth seep through her skin, filling her with a steady strength. The seed in her pocket thrummed in response, a tiny spark igniting deep inside her chest. The great tree's carvings shimmered and shifted, revealing new patterns, a map of light and shadow, of paths walked and those yet to be taken. The spirals connected, weaving a tapestry that wrapped around her like a cloak. In that moment, the stranger's voice echoed in her mind, clear and steady. To carry the light is to carry the forest within you. To walk its path is to become part of its story, forever entwined. She closed her eyes, breathing in the deep scent of pine and earth, feeling the forest pulse beneath her skin, its heartbeat mingling with her own. When she opened her eyes, the lantern's glow was no longer just in her hand. It was everywhere, in the leaves, the roots, the very air she breathed. The path stretched behind and before her, endless and alive, a journey both outward and within. And she was ready. The lantern path was no longer a trail through the woods. It was the story of who she was, a story whispered beneath the canopy, carried on the wind, and held forever in the heart of the forest. With the flame steady and the seed planted deep, she stepped forward into the night, the forest alive around her, a world of light, shadow, memory, and endless possibility. The night deepened around her, the stars hidden behind thick, weaving branches that formed a vaulted ceiling overhead. The forest breathed a low, steady hum, like a heartbeat echoing beneath layers of earth and shadow. With the great tree behind her, its glowing spirals still pulsing faintly in the dark, she moved forward, the lantern's soft glow cutting a narrow path through the thick underbrush. Each step seemed to awaken something ancient, something waiting patiently in the silence. The seed she had planted pulsed softly in her pocket, a gentle reminder that she carried more than light. She carried the forest's hope, its future folded into a tiny, fragile form. The path twisted suddenly, descending into a hollow carved by forgotten waters long dried, its walls lined with roots that stretched like veins, pulsing with faint light. Here the air was thick with the scent of damp stone and hidden streams, and the quiet was so deep it felt like falling into a dream. She paused, listening. Beneath the soft murmur of the forest was another sound, faint, distant, like voices carried on a far-off breeze. The stranger's voice rose again in her memory, steady and sure. Some echoes are old as the earth, carried in the roots and stones. They wait not to be forgotten, but to be remembered. She knelt by a shallow pool hidden beneath the roots, its glassy surface catching the lantern's glow and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny stars. The voices seemed to ripple beneath the water, indistinct but urgent. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the surface. The pool rippled outward, and suddenly, images bloomed within its depths. Faces she had never seen but somehow knew, moments lost to time, laughter, tears, whispers of farewell, and the steady passing of seasons. She watched, spellbound, as the forgotten stories of the forest came alive in shimmering fragments, carried on currents of memory beneath the water's surface. The lantern's flame flickered, casting dancing shadows that wove through the roots and stones, a silent dance of light and dark, past and present. She felt herself becoming part of the weave, threads of her own story intertwining with those she glimpsed, a tapestry ever growing, forever shifting beneath the canopy of stars and leaves. When the visions faded, the pool stilled again, reflecting only the night and the steady flame of the lantern. She rose, heart heavy but full, knowing the path ahead was not just one of steps, but of stories waiting to be lived and remembered. With the seed's quiet pulse guiding her, she stepped deeper into the forest's embrace, ready to listen, to learn, and to carry the echoes forward. The forest around her seemed to exhale, a slow, deliberate breath that stirred the leaves and whispered through the branches like a secret long held close. The air was cool now, tinged with the faintest hint of something sweet, like the scent of wildflowers after rain, carried faintly beneath the heavier notes of earth and moss. The path beneath her feet was soft and yielding, a bed of fallen leaves and rich soil that seemed to cushion each step. The lantern's glow pulsed steadily, a small heartbeat in the vast darkness, casting gentle light that flickered and danced with every movement. Above, the canopy wove a lattice of shadow and moonlight, painting the ground with shifting patterns that looked like living veins, the breath of the forest made visible. She paused, closing her eyes to listen, to feel the space between the shadows, the silence that filled the gaps where sound could not reach. It was in these quiet moments, suspended between heartbeats and breath, that the forest spoke most clearly. A soft rustle stirred nearby, leaves brushing against one another like whispered voices. She opened her eyes slowly, catching a glimpse of movement, a flash of silver, a flicker of light darting through the undergrowth. The stranger's presence felt near again, though unseen, a calm assurance in the shifting dark. She stepped forward, the lantern's glow steadying her path as the forest seemed to lean inward, watching, waiting. The air thickened, charged with quiet energy, as if the very breath between shadows held the promise of revelation, a truth folded within the folds of night and light. Her fingers brushed against the rough bark of a nearby tree, and she felt the pulse of life beneath the surface, the slow, steady rhythm of the forest's heart beating in time with her own. The lantern flickered once, then held firm, a beacon of warmth and light in the breath between shadows. With a steadying breath, she stepped onward, deeper into the mystery, ready to face whatever waited in the silent spaces beyond the fire's glow. The path dipped suddenly, winding down into a hollow shrouded in mist so thick it seemed to swallow the light whole. The lantern's glow fought against the dense fog, its soft radiance barely pushing back the veil of white that clung to every branch, leaf, and blade of grass. The air was cooler here, moist and heavy with the scent of earth and forgotten things. A silence hung in the space like a fragile breath held too long, broken only by the occasional drip of water falling from leaf to moss below. She moved cautiously, each step deliberate and slow, feeling the weight of the forest's watchful presence pressing close. The hollow was a place of memory, a resting place for whispers that had no voice, stories waiting to be told. Beneath the lantern's light, shapes began to emerge, faint outlines of stones arranged in a circle, worn smooth by time and weather. The stones pulsed softly with a faint blue light, casting ghostly shadows that danced with the mist. She knelt among them, tracing the ancient carvings etched into the rock, spirals, lines, and symbols that seemed to shift beneath her touch, alive with meaning she could almost grasp. The stranger's voice was a whisper in her mind. Here, the forest speaks through silence. The hollow listens, remembers, and holds what others forget. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the mist curl around her like a soft embrace. The whispers began, barely audible at first, then growing clearer, voices of the past rising like a chorus from beneath the earth. They told of journeys begun and ended, of choices made beneath these very trees, of light lost and found again. The lantern flickered gently, its light merging with the blue glow of the stones, weaving a tapestry of shadow and luminescence that wrapped the hollow in a quiet, sacred glow. As she rose, the mist seemed to part, revealing a narrow path leading onward, deeper into the heart of the forest and closer to the truth she sought. With the lantern steady in her hand and the hollow's whispers echoing in her heart, she stepped forward into the unknown. The path ahead was narrow, winding through ancient trees whose branches seemed to weave overhead like a cathedral's vaulted ceiling. The mist lingered, curling around roots and rocks, catching the lantern's glow and scattering it into shimmering threads of silver light. Each step felt like a step deeper into a dream, the air thick with magic, memory, and the quiet weight of stories waiting to unfold. The forest whispered around her, voices like soft winds brushing against leaves, carrying fragments of forgotten songs and distant laughter. Her fingers brushed the spiral leaf still folded carefully in her palm, its warmth a quiet pulse against her skin. It was a talisman now, a guide through the shadows and a reminder of the path she had chosen. Ahead, the trees parted slightly, revealing a small clearing bathed in pale moonlight. In its center, a pool of water shimmered like glass, reflecting the stars hidden above and the flickering lantern light. She knelt at the edge, gazing into the depths. Beneath the surface, silver threads of light moved slowly, weaving patterns that seemed alive, stories told in liquid motion, fragile and luminous. The stranger's voice echoed softly in her mind. These threads are the lives intertwined with this place, each one a thread in the endless tapestry of the forest's memory. She reached out, fingertips barely touching the water's surface. The threads pulsed and shifted, responding to her presence, wrapping gently around her fingers like ribbons of light. Visions bloomed in her mind, faces and places, moments of joy and sorrow, beginnings and ends intertwined. She saw the forest's past and future interlaced in the silver strands, each thread a story she was now part of. The lantern's flame flickered, casting long shadows that danced alongside the silver light. As she rose, the threads pulled gently, guiding her forward, deeper into the night, into the stories still waiting to be told beneath the canopy's embrace. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she stepped beyond the shimmering pool, the silver threads of light weaving silently behind her like a gentle current of memory. The path grew darker, the canopy thickening until the world felt enclosed in a living cocoon of leaves and shadow. The lantern's glow was steady now, a soft beacon in the dense gloom, casting long wavering shapes that flickered like quiet ghosts among the tree trunks. Each breath she took was slow, deliberate, as if syncing with the forest's ancient rhythm. A sudden rustle stirred the air ahead, leaves trembling as if touched by unseen fingers. Figures emerged from the darkness, tall, slender silhouettes cloaked in shifting shadows. They moved without sound, their presence both ethereal and commanding, blending seamlessly with the night. She felt no fear, only a deep, reverent calm. These were not threats, but guardians, keepers of the forest's countless stories, watchers of the path she now walked. One stepped forward, the flicker of the lantern illuminating a face that was less a face and more a reflection. Fluid, shifting, alive with the light of countless memories. They spoke without words, their meaning unfolding directly in her mind. You carry the light of the forest within you now. The path is yours, but so too is the weight of its shadows. The lantern pulsed gently, and the shadows gathered closer, weaving around her like a cloak. They were stories untold, secrets kept safe in darkness, waiting for a bearer who would listen and remember. She nodded slowly, accepting the mantle laid before her, the burden and blessing of carrying the forest's heart. With the guardians beside her and the lantern as her guide, she stepped forward into the gathering night, ready to walk the lantern path forevermore. The forest fell into a hush after the shadows dispersed, the heavy stillness wrapping around her like a thick velvet curtain. The guardians melted back into the darkness, their presence lingering like a fading melody in the air, as if the very trees themselves exhaled a quiet breath of relief. She stood alone once more, the lantern's glow now a steady heartbeat in the vast quiet. The path stretched before her, winding and uncertain, draped in a gentle mist that seemed to soften every edge. The weight of the forest story settled deep within her, like stones layered beneath the soil, steady, unmoving, yet full of unseen power. The seed she had planted beneath the roots pulsed faintly in her pocket, a reminder that life and memory intertwined in endless cycles. The air smelled of wet bark and old leaves, a scent both comforting and haunting, carrying the echo of footsteps long past and those yet to come. She breathed it in deeply, letting the silence fill every corner of her mind. Ahead, the path curved around a massive oak, its branches twisting like ancient fingers reaching toward the sky. She paused, running her fingers along its rough bark, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath the surface. The forest was not silent. It was listening, waiting. In the quiet, she heard it, a faint whisper almost too soft to catch, threading through the rustling leaves. A promise, a warning, a greeting. She tightened her grip on the lantern, heart steady but full of anticipation. The lantern path was far from over. With a slow, sure step, she moved forward into the silence after the gathering, into the next chapter of the story written beneath the canopy. The night deepened, the forest breathing softly under the weight of the moon, which hung low and heavy like a pale lantern itself. Its light filtered through the dense canopy, splintering into veins of silver that traced the edges of leaves, bark, and moss with ethereal grace. Each step she took felt like moving through a world half-remembered, where time folded softly upon itself like the curling tendrils of fog that drifted between the trees. The lantern in her hand pulsed with warmth, steady and sure, a beacon against the vastness of shadow that stretched endlessly in every direction. The forest was alive in ways she could feel but not fully see, whispers hidden beneath the rustle of leaves, the faint shimmer of movement just beyond sight, the gentle pulse of life flowing through every root and branch. She paused beside a great stone, its surface mottled and worn by centuries of rain and wind, and traced the spiral carvings etched deep into its face. The shapes glowed faintly under her touch, as if waking from a long slumber, casting pale light that mingled with the moonbeams weaving through the trees. The stranger's voice came to her then, soft and distant, like the echo of a dream. Moonlight is the forest's breath made visible. It reveals the paths hidden in shadow and the stories waiting to be told. She looked up, watching the light ripple through the leaves, veins of silver threading through the darkness like a map written in silence and memory. The path before her shimmered faintly, the forest inviting her onward, deeper into its heart. As she stepped forward, the lantern's glow seemed to pulse in harmony with the moonlight, weaving a dance of warmth and cold, light and shadow. The world around her became a tapestry of shifting patterns, each one a thread in the endless story of the forest, a story she was now part of. The air grew cooler, the scent of pine and earth sharpening as the path wound downward toward a place that promised answers, or perhaps more questions. Her breath steady, her heart open, she followed the veins of moonlight, guided by the lantern, the seed in her pocket, and the stories whispered beneath the canopy's embrace. The trail led her downward through the dense undergrowth, winding past towering ferns and ancient roots that curled like sleeping serpents beneath her feet. The forest grew darker still, the canopy thickening into a near-impenetrable weave of branches and leaves that muted even the moonlight. Yet the lantern in her hand pulsed with steady warmth, a steadfast beacon amid the encroaching shadows. Its light cast soft, dancing patterns across the mossy ground, illuminating delicate spiderwebs and glistening droplets clinging to leaves like tiny jewels. She paused as the path opened into a wide hollow, a natural basin carved deep into the earth. At its center lay a pool so still and dark it mirrored the night sky perfectly, catching every glimmer of starlight that filtered down through the gaps above. This was the Well of Stars, a place the forest held sacred, where past and future mingled in a quiet dance of light and shadow. Kneeling at the water's edge, she gazed into the depths. The surface shimmered, rippling softly with the gentle breeze, and within its dark mirror, she saw flickering images, memories of those who had walked the lantern path before her. Faces blurred with time, moments of joy and sorrow, laughter carried on the wind, and tears shed beneath these very trees. The well held their stories, every life a thread woven into the vast tapestry of the forest's memory. The lantern's flame flickered, and in that movement the stars above seemed to pulse in rhythm, their silver light weaving down into the well and back again, an endless cycle of remembrance and renewal. She dipped her hand into the water, feeling a coolness that seeped into her skin and spread warmth through her veins, like the touch of something ancient and kind. The seed in her pocket throbbed softly, a heartbeat in sync with the well's quiet song. She closed her eyes and let the whispers of the past wash over her, voices rising and falling like the tide, guiding her toward the truth she sought, and the destiny she could no longer deny. When she opened her eyes, the well was still once more, reflecting only the steady glow of the lantern and the distant shimmer of stars hidden above. She rose, resolve steadying in her chest, and turned from the well of stars, ready to carry its light forward, deeper into the forest's eternal embrace. Leaving the well of stars behind, she stepped back onto the winding path, now softened underfoot by a thick carpet of moss and fallen leaves. The forest around her had shifted again, the air growing cooler, the scent heavier with damp earth and wildflowers she couldn't name. A pale mist rolled in silently, weaving through the trees like a slow-moving river of smoke. It curled around roots and trunks, drifting over stones, swallowing the path in a gentle embrace. The lantern's glow became a muted pulse, diffusing softly into the swirling veil. The stranger's voice whispered in her mind, steady and calm. The mist is the forest's breath, a veil between what is and what might be, between memory and dream. She slowed, letting the mist wrap around her like a cloak, soft and weightless. The world became a place without edges, where shadows melted into light, and time stretched like a ribbon unraveling in the breeze. Shapes moved just beyond sight, flickers of movement, a glint of eyes, the faintest touch of wings brushing through the haze. The forest was alive with secrets, ancient and fragile, held close beneath the veil. She reached out, fingertips brushing the mist, and felt a shiver run through her, a promise, a warning, a beckoning. The path wound deeper into the haze, the lantern's light barely piercing the thickness, guiding her like a steady heartbeat through the uncertain glow. Ahead, the mist parted slowly, revealing a glade bathed in soft, silver light. At its center stood a circle of ancient stones, their surfaces worn smooth, crowned with delicate blooms that seemed to glow faintly in the mist's embrace. The air thrummed with quiet power, a sacred stillness that pressed against her skin like a touch from the past. She stepped into the circle, the mist swirling at her feet, the lantern's flame steady and warm in her hand. In that moment, the forest held its breath, and the veil lifted just enough to reveal the path forward. The glade felt alive with whispers, as if the stones themselves held voices trapped in their ancient faces. She moved slowly within the circle, the soft petals brushing her skin, their glow pulsing gently with the rhythm of the lantern's flame. The air was thick with echoes, not sounds but feelings, memories folded into the stone, waiting to be released. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the silence fill her. Then, faintly at first, a murmur stirred, a ripple of voices weaving through the air like threads of silver light. They grew clearer, forming a chorus of memories that swirled around her, brushing against her mind with gentle insistence. Fragments of stories, laughter from a summer long gone, the crackle of firelight, the soft sigh of wind through leaves, all wrapped together in a tapestry of soundless song. Her fingers traced the cool stone, and she felt the pulse of the past beneath her touch, the hopes and fears of those who had come before, their lives woven into the forest's endless story. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows that danced like spirits between the trees. The echoes grew louder, surrounding her, lifting her, until she felt herself drifting weightless into the heart of the forest's memory. There she saw herself, a single thread woven into the vast web, connected to countless others by silver strands of light. The path was not hers alone. It belonged to all who had walked before and all who would follow. With a steady breath, she opened her eyes, the echoes fading gently into the quiet. The forest awaited her next step. The forest around her pulsed with a silent rhythm, ancient and steady, as though the very earth beneath her feet was alive with secrets waiting to be uncovered. The path twisted tighter now, the trees crowding in like silent sentinels guarding a sacred truth. Her lantern cast soft pools of light, revealing tangled roots and thick underbrush that seemed almost to breathe, swelling and contracting with a life of their own. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, wild herbs, and the faintest hint of smoke, like a fire long since extinguished but never forgotten. She moved with cautious reverence, feeling the weight of the forest's gaze upon her, its attention folded into every rustle and shadow. Beneath the surface, the soil seemed to hum, a low vibration that stirred something deep within her bones. At the edge of the thicket, she found a narrow hollow framed by ancient oaks whose branches arched overhead like cathedral vaults. The space felt alive with possibility, a heartbeat suspended in time. She stepped inside, and the lantern's light revealed a circle of stones half buried in moss and leaves. Each stone was etched with delicate spirals and symbols, worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind. In the center lay a small patch of earth, softer and darker than the rest, as if it had been recently disturbed. She knelt, brushing away damp leaves to reveal a single seed cradled in the soil, small, glimmering faintly with an inner light. The seed pulsed gently in her palm, warm and alive, a promise of growth and change. She felt the forest's breath around her, the silent chorus of life pushing upward from roots and earth and memory. The stranger's voice returned, a whisper like the wind threading through the branches. This is the heart of the forest story, where endings become beginnings, and the path you walk folds into the endless cycle of life. She planted the seed carefully in the soft earth, pressing it gently beneath the surface. The ground seemed to pulse in response, a slow gloom of warmth spreading outward, carrying the promise of new stories yet to come. Rising, she felt the weight of the forest settle into her spirit, a quiet strength woven from shadows and light, memory and hope. With the lantern steady in her hand and the promise of growth beneath her feet, she stepped back onto the path, ready to follow where the forest's heart would lead. The air had changed, thickening with a resonance she could almost hear, a low humming melody woven into the rustle of leaves and the distant drip of water. It was not a song of birds or wind, but something older, deeper, a pulse that thrummed beneath the surface of the forest itself. The path wound forward beneath towering trees whose branches swayed gently, casting intricate shadows that danced in time with the unseen rhythm. The lantern's light flickered softly, its glow pulsing in tandem with the melody that seemed to rise from the earth. She moved slowly, each step deliberate and measured, listening to the song that wrapped around her like a delicate thread pulling her onward. The forest was alive with voices, faint echoes of laughter, sighs, and whispered secrets carried on the breeze. Along the way, the forest floor was carpeted with a blanket of leaves, their edges shimmering faintly as if kissed by starlight. She knelt, brushing her fingers across them, feeling the vibration of the song beneath her touch, a lullaby sung not to soothe but to remember. The stranger appeared beside her, silent and still, watching the leaves with an intensity that made the air feel thick with meaning. Their voice was a breath against her mind. The song is the forest's memory, carried in every leaf, every root, every breath of wind. It holds the stories of those who came before, and those yet to come. She closed her eyes, letting the melody wash over her, feeling it thread through her very being, weaving her story into the forest's endless song. The lantern's glow brightened, casting long beams that stretched beyond the trees, illuminating the path ahead, a path sung by leaves and light, shadow and silence. She rose, heart full, ready to follow the song wherever it led. The song beneath the leaves led her to a hollow nestled deep between towering trunks. It was a place where the forest seemed to gather its breath, a pocket of stillness framed by ancient roots that curled like sleeping serpents and moss that softened the earth's hard edges. The air here was thick with silence, yet the echoes of the song still lingered, faint and trembling like the last note of a lullaby. She stepped inside, the lantern's glow spilling softly across the hollow's floor, revealing faint impressions pressed into the soil, footprints older than memory, and symbols etched by hands long turned to dust. She knelt to trace the markings, feeling the roughness beneath her fingers and the pulse of stories held in stone and earth. Each symbol was a fragment, a whisper of voices that once spoke here, their meaning lost to time but their presence felt in the very bones of the forest. The stranger's presence was close now, a steady warmth beside her, though their face remained a shifting reflection of shadow and light. Their voice brushed against her thoughts like a breeze. Whispers dwell where stories are waiting to be heard. This hollow holds the voices of those who listened before you, keepers of the past and guides to what is yet to come. The lantern flickered, and the hollow seemed to breathe with her, rising and falling in quiet rhythm. The shadows lengthened, wrapping around the stones and roots like a gentle embrace, as if the forest itself was welcoming her deeper into its heart. She closed her eyes and listened, tracing the faint voices carried on the wind, the murmur of leaves, the soft sigh of earth settling beneath the weight of countless stories. And in that stillness she felt a new thread weave into the tapestry, a promise of connection, a bond between past and present, light and shadow. When she opened her eyes, the hollow was bathed in a gentle glow, the path ahead clearer, the forest story unfolding with every step she took. The path ahead wound tighter, the trees leaning closer as if to guard a secret. Their gnarled roots twisted and braided across the ground, weaving a natural bridge that arched over a dark, slow-moving creek, the water barely visible beneath the thick canopy of leaves. The forest here felt ancient beyond measure, each root and stone saturated with centuries of rain, sunlight, and silence. The air was cooler, the scent of damp earth sharp and sweet, carrying a hint of wild herbs and something faintly metallic, like the memory of blood long shed and forgotten. She stepped carefully onto the bridge, the lantern's light casting soft reflections on the water below. The surface was still, mirroring the intricate lattice of roots above and the faint glimmer of stars winking through the gaps in the leaves. The stranger moved beside her, their presence steady and reassuring despite the shadows that clung thickly to the edges of the path. They reached out, touching a root with fingers that seemed to ripple through the wood like a song passing through strings. A faint hum rose from the bridge, subtle and deep, the forest's own voice rising from the earth to meet hers. It was a sound that vibrated in her chest, calling forth memories and feelings she didn't know she carried, connecting her to the countless footsteps that had crossed this bridge before. She paused midway, looking down into the dark water where her reflection shimmered, flickering between her own face and the ghostly visage of the stranger beside her, a reminder that the forest stories were never hers alone. The lantern's glow steadied in her hand, a tether to the present as the roots beneath whispered tales of connection, endurance, and passage. With a breath deep and sure, she crossed the bridge, stepping firmly onto the path beyond, where the forest's heart beat strong, and the lantern path stretched onward into the unknown. Beyond the bridge, the path opened into a vast clearing, where towering trees formed a perfect circle, their ancient trunks entwined like the fingers of old friends reunited. The space inside was bathed in soft moonlight that slipped through the canopy like liquid silver, illuminating the forest floor carpeted with delicate ferns and wildflowers that glowed faintly in the dark. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, mixed with a subtle sweetness, like the promise of renewal hidden in the breath of night. She stepped into the circle, the lantern's warm light steady in her hand, casting long shadows that danced gently along the moss-covered stones encircling the clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, its bark gnarled and twisted into swirling patterns that seemed to pulse with a quiet life of their own. Its roots spread wide, dipping deep into the earth, and at its base was a hollow, dark and inviting, a doorway to something unseen but deeply known. The stranger stopped beside her, their voice low and steady, carrying the weight of countless seasons. This is the heartwood, the soul of the forest. Here, the past and future intertwine, and the lantern's journey finds its meaning. She approached the tree, placing the lantern gently at its roots. The flame flickered and then steadied, its light weaving into the patterns on the bark, causing them to glow with a soft, golden radiance. The hollow seemed to breathe, a gentle pulse that echoed in her chest as if the tree itself was alive, listening, remembering, waiting. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched the bark. A rush of images flooded her mind, moments of growth and loss, joy and sorrow, the endless cycle of life that the forest carried within its heart. The seed she had planted earlier pulsed warmly in her pocket, and she knew it was ready to become part of this story, part of this place. With a deep breath, she knelt and planted her hands at the base of the tree, feeling the pulse of life surge beneath her fingertips, a connection stretching across time and space, binding her to the forest forever. The lantern's light grew stronger, bathing the clearing in a golden glow that chased away the shadows and filled the night with quiet hope. She rose slowly, the weight of the journey settling into a steady calm within her. The lantern path had led her here, to the heartwood, to the place where stories end and begin anew. The golden glow from the heartwood tree lingered in the clearing like a gentle pulse, radiating outward and weaving through the forest in soft threads of light. The night seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of nocturnal creatures silent, as if listening to some unspoken prayer. She stepped away from the heartwood circle, her footsteps light on the mossy ground. The lantern's flame flickered softly, mirroring the rhythm of her own heartbeat, steady, calm, and sure. The path ahead was no longer clearly marked by stone or root, but by the faint rustling of leaves, whispers carried on the breath of the wind. These leaves shimmered in the lantern light, each one etched with delicate veins that glowed faintly like silver filigree. The stranger moved silently beside her, their presence a steady comfort, blending with the shadows like part of the forest itself. As she followed the trail of whispering leaves, the air grew cooler, filled with the scent of rain yet to fall and earth freshly turned by unseen hands. The whispers grew louder, forming words that tickled the edges of her mind, promises, warnings, stories half remembered and half forgotten. She reached out and touched one of the shimmering leaves. It felt cool and alive beneath her fingers, like the touch of a gentle pulse, a heartbeat caught in the night. The leaf trembled, then floated upward, joining a swirl of others that danced around her like a living constellation. The whispers turned to song, a soft, haunting melody that wrapped around her like a silken thread. She closed her eyes, letting the song fill her senses, and for a moment the forest and she were one, a single breath in the endless rhythm of life and memory. When she opened her eyes, the path ahead was clear once more, glowing softly with the light of 1,000 whispering leaves, guiding her onward through the forest's eternal embrace. The whispering leaves faded behind her as she stepped onto a softer ground, where the forest thinned and the canopy opened to reveal the night sky in full, stars scattered like scattered diamonds across the velvet darkness. Ahead, nestled between ancient trees, lay a pool so still and clear it was like a perfect mirror laid out beneath the heavens. The surface reflected the constellations above, and the lantern's warm glow flickered gently against the edges of the water. She approached the pool cautiously, her footsteps barely stirring the moss. The stranger stood quietly at her side, the glow from their faceless hoods softening in the moonlight. The water called to her, not with sound but with a pull deep in her chest, like a thread tugging at memories half remembered and futures still unwritten. Kneeling at the pool's edge, she reached out, fingers brushing the glassy surface. The water rippled softly, distorting the stars until they swirled into shapes, faces, places, moments, reflections of herself in the forest, interwoven and inseparable. The lantern's light shimmered, casting a circle of warmth around her. The pool showed not just what was, but what could be, the countless paths the forest held within its heart, the choices waiting to be made. In the depths, she saw the spiral symbol glowing softly, a beacon amidst the dark water. It was a reminder that every journey was a circle, every ending a beginning. She closed her eyes, letting the vision settle deep within her, and when she opened them, the pool was still once more, holding its secrets beneath a blanket of stars. Rising slowly, she felt the weight of the forest story settle around her like a cloak, endless, ancient, and hers to carry forward. The lantern pulsed gently in her hand, and she stepped away from the mirror pool, ready to walk the path ahead, wherever it might lead. Leaving the mirror pool behind, she followed the path as it narrowed and dipped beneath ancient boughs heavy with moss. The forest seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as if the very trees carried the lifeblood of the earth within their veins. Her lantern's light glowed steadily, revealing faint ribbons of light weaving through the shadows like delicate threads of silver. These veins of light traced patterns across the bark of the trees, winding upward and disappearing into the canopy above. The stranger's silhouette moved alongside her, merging with the shifting light and shadow. Their voice came like a soft echo in her mind. These veins are the forest's heartbeat, the flow of life and memory that sustains all living things. Follow them and you will find the source. She reached out, letting her fingers hover just above one glowing ribbon. The light was warm, humming softly, alive with the pulse of centuries. It responded to her presence, brightening and bending toward her, inviting her onward. The path of veins twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the woods where the air grew thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the canopy above shimmered with faint ethereal light. Each step seemed to draw her closer to something profound, a place where time and space blurred, and the forest's true nature revealed itself in whispers and light. The lantern's glow expanded, bathing the trail in a gentle radiance as she followed the veins of light toward the heart of the forest's eternal secret. The deeper she traveled, the more the veins of light thickened, weaving an intricate lattice beneath the ancient canopy. Each glowing thread pulsed with life, a delicate network of energy that seemed to breathe in rhythm with her own heart. Around her, the forest felt alive, not just in the movement of leaves or the murmur of wind, but in a profound sense of connection. Every root, every leaf, every drop of rain whispered a story, and through the veins of light, those stories intertwined into a living tapestry. She came upon a clearing where the veins converged in a brilliant nexus, a radiant web spun between towering trunks that stretched beyond sight. At the center, a crystal-clear pool shimmered, catching the glow of the veins and reflecting it back like 1,000 stars trapped in still water. The strangers stood silently by the pool, their faceless reflection shimmering alongside the light. They gestured to the pool, their presence both invitation and command. She knelt at the edge, peering into the depths. The water was alive with shifting images, moments from her journey, faces and places intertwined with the forest's own memories. She saw herself walking beneath the trees, the lantern glowing steady in her grasp, the spiral symbol glowing softly in the shadows. The pool rippled, and a single vein of light reached out, extending from the water's heart and wrapping gently around her wrist. A warmth spread through her, steady and strong. A promise, a bond, a reminder that she was now part of this eternal web. The lantern pulsed with new intensity, its light merging with the veins, becoming one. She rose, feeling the forest's heartbeat within her own. a rhythm ancient and unending, a path not just to be walked but to be lived. With a final glance at the pool's shimmering surface, she turned toward the path ahead, ready to carry the story forward, through shadow and light, memory and dream. Stepping away from the luminous pool, the forest around her seemed to shift. Shadows stretched longer, folding into one another until the line between light and dark became thin and blurred, a veil woven from mist and memory. The path narrowed, bordered by trees whose trunks twisted and bent in impossible shapes, their bark shimmering faintly as if cloaked in a silken film. The air grew cool, scented with damp stone and distant rain, and a quiet hum filled the space, vibrating through the soil and into her bones. The stranger walked beside her, silent and still, their presence like a steady anchor in this shifting realm. Their reflection flickered in the veil, a distorted echo of form and light, never fully present, always just beyond reach. She reached out, her fingers grazing the mist, feeling it ripple and part like water, revealing glimpses of places and faces, moments that felt both distant and achingly close. The veil was a threshold, a boundary between what had been and what could be, a place where the forest held its secrets close, yet offered them to those willing to step beyond. Her lantern pulsed with steady light, cutting through the haze, guiding her forward. Each step was a promise, to remember, to honor, to become part of the story unfolding beyond the veil. The stranger's voice brushed her mind, soft and unspoken. To cross the veil is to embrace the unknown, to find truth not just in sight, but in the spaces between. With resolve burning steady, she stepped into the mist, feeling the forest breathe around her, and the path unfurl before her like a ribbon of light through shadow. Beyond the veil, the forest transformed again, its familiar shapes melting into something both strange and beautiful. Shadows moved with intention, stretching and swirling like living smoke, and the air vibrated with a quiet energy that hummed beneath her skin. The lantern's light fought the darkness, casting rings of warmth that held back the encroaching gloom but never banished it entirely. Each shadow seemed alive with a purpose, whispering secrets and voices that brushed her mind like the softest wind. She walked steadily, the stranger close at her side, their presence a calm counterpoint to the restless shadows. They moved together through a landscape that shifted beneath their feet, a place where memory and fear intertwined, and where the boundaries between past and present blurred. Here the forest was not just a place but a presence, watching, waiting, breathing. It welcomed her and challenged her in the same breath. The path opened to a wide clearing ringed by towering trees that arched overhead, their branches woven tightly to form a canopy that swallowed the stars. At its center stood a stone altar, worn smooth by countless years, etched with spirals and symbols that glowed faintly in the lantern's light. She approached the altar, feeling the weight of the forest's gaze settle upon her like a mantle. The shadows seemed to gather here, coalescing into shapes both familiar and strange, echoes of those who had come before and whispers of those yet to come. The stranger knelt beside the altar, raising a hand to touch the glowing symbols. The light flared briefly, illuminating the clearing in a burst of gold and silver, then softened into a gentle glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. She placed her hands on the altar, feeling the energy flow through her, a connection unbroken by time or space, binding her to the forest and its endless stories. The shadows danced around her, no longer threatening but protective, guardians of the path she had chosen. With a breath full of quiet strength, she rose, ready to walk forward into the gathering night, her lantern a beacon against the dark. As she stepped away from the altar, the forest seemed to exhale, releasing a stillness so profound it settled over her like a gentle shroud. The shadows softened, folding back into the trees, and the night was filled with a silence that was not empty but alive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something yet to be spoken. Around her, the leaves began to tremble, caught in a breeze she could not feel. The rustling grew into a chorus, soft, ethereal, and wordless, a silent choir carried on the wind and woven into the fabric of the night. She closed her eyes and listened, the melody threading through her very being. It was not music as she knew it, but a language older than sound, the forest's voice speaking in whispers of light and shadow, memory and hope. The stranger stood silently by her side, their faceless presence reflecting the gentle glow of the lantern. Without words they reached out, their hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a touch that spoke of trust, guidance, and the shared weight of the journey. The path ahead was no longer just a trail through the trees. It was a passage through stories, hers, the forest's, and those woven between them like threads in an endless tapestry. With the lantern held steady, she stepped forward, each footfall echoing softly in the silent choir. The night embraced her, its song unfolding with every breath, and she moved deeper into the heart of the forest's eternal dream. The silent choir's melody lingered like a faint afterglow as she followed the narrowing path deeper beneath the towering trees. The ground beneath her feet softened, rich with the scent of damp earth and decayed leaves. The forest's roots here stretched wide and tangled, weaving a labyrinth beneath the surface, ancient veins pulsing with unseen life. She could feel their energy humming through the soil, a steady thrum that resonated deep in her bones. The lantern's glow revealed glimpses of the roots curling up beside the trail, thick and knotted, some split open like broken ribs, others smooth as polished wood. They seemed to reach toward her, not menacing but beckoning, as if the forest itself was calling her to look beneath the surface. The stranger moved beside her, their steps light and soundless. They knelt suddenly, placing a hand on the earth, and the roots around them shimmered faintly, weaving threads of silver light that traced patterns she could not yet understand. She crouched too, hands pressed against the cool soil. The pulse beneath was steady and strong, like the heartbeat of the forest itself, a deep, ancient rhythm connecting all things visible and hidden. A breeze stirred above, rustling leaves that whispered forgotten tales. The lantern's light flickered softly, casting dancing shadows that revealed shapes beneath the roots, symbols carved into stone, delicate and worn, telling stories of beginnings and endings intertwined. The forest held its breath again, and she felt the weight of those stories settle over her, a gift and a responsibility. With a steady breath, she rose, the roots' rhythm now a steady drum in her veins. The path ahead stretched dark and waiting, but she carried the forest's heartbeat within her, a light steady enough to guide her through shadow and silence. The forest grew quieter still, the roots beneath her feet winding tighter as if drawing her closer to a secret long held beneath the earth. The lantern's gentle glow pulsed steadily, casting soft rings of light that danced along the twisting path ahead. She felt the weight of the journey settle deep inside her, a mixture of longing and resolve, a quiet understanding that she was nearing the end of the path and the beginning of something new. The stranger's presence was beside her still, unwavering and calm, a silent guardian in the fading light. Together they moved toward a clearing where the trees bent low, their branches weaving a canopy shaped like a spiral, ancient and infinite. At the center, the ground bore the mark of the same spiral she had seen before, etched deep into the soil, alive with a faint, shimmering light that pulsed like a heartbeat. She knelt and traced the spiral with her fingers, feeling the warmth radiate up her arm and settle in her chest. The lantern's flame flickered once, then steadied, matching the rhythm of the spiral beneath her touch. Memories, whispers, and the forest's countless stories swirled around her, a dance of shadow and light, of endings and beginnings intertwined in the spiral's endless loop. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, surrendering to the path that had led her here, the path beyond sleep, beyond time, beyond fear. When she opened them again, the stranger was gone. But the lantern remained, its light steady and warm, a beacon in the heart of the forest's eternal embrace. Rising slowly, she took a step forward, the spiral beneath her feet glowing softly, guiding her onward into the quiet promise of dawn. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the trees, soft and tentative, like a whispered promise. The forest, once cloaked in shadow and mystery, now seemed to breathe gently in the gentle glow of morning. She stood alone in the clearing, the spiral at her feet still glowing faintly beneath the earth, a quiet heartbeat beneath the soil, echoing the journey she had taken. The lantern's light pulsed once more in her hand, steady and warm, a tether between night and day, memory and future. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wet pine and fresh earth, and somewhere far above, a bird began to sing, a clear, hopeful note that carried through the silence like a prayer. She breathed deeply, feeling the forest's pulse within her own, a rhythm that would guide her beyond the path, beyond the stories, into whatever lay ahead. The stranger was gone, but not truly gone. Their presence lingered in the quiet rustle of leaves, the shimmer of light on the water, and the steady glow of the lantern she now carried, not as a visitor, but as a keeper of the forest's eternal story. With one last glance at the clearing, she turned toward the trees, stepping forward into the dawnlit woods, the lantern's flame steady in her grasp, lighting the way not just through the forest, but into the endless promise of a new day. The lantern path had led her home,